welcome to the Art of Being Human. We've started a segment on medications, what they are, how to use them, what about herbs, and all of the kinds of things you run into in terms of herbal medications. And I gave some examples of what happens if you don't watch your dosages, what are the horrible things that can happen to your system, and then we went on from there. But I want to go back and revisit some of the things I found out about people who are using herbs or using drugs, but they're not being careful of their dosages. I have 2 or 3 more kinds of examples to give you, so I want to go back there just to show you the importance of watching what you take and how much you take of it and when you take it, because if you don't take a medication right, or if you don't take your herbs right, if you're using herbs, you can do a lot of damage to yourself. So these are 2 or 3 more case studies I've run up against, and interesting enough, and I think important enough to bring them to your attention, although I've done some of that already. As I said, I'm going to revisit this a little. So let me give you some examples. There is a talk show host. He's on the air. He's been on the air for a few years. He continues to be on the air, and a lot of people listen to him. It's basically radio. I have never seen him on TV, but it's basically radio. And he's conservative, and he has a lot of things to say about politics. Well, he took a drug. I'm not going to give you his name. I know who it is, but I'm not going to give you his name. He took a drug, some kind of a drug. I suspect it was an herb to help with something. I don't know what it was. I don't know that much about it. But whatever it was, he must have got too much, because within a half an hour, he went completely deaf. He had a show, he went on a show, and his hearing just gradually got worse and worse and worse. And you know, it was a call-in show, so people could call in and talk with him about what the subject was for the day that he was discussing. Well, he started the show, and he could hear by half an hour, 30 minutes, he went just extremely deaf, completely deaf. He could not hear anything. So they had to stop the show. He was off the air for several months or several weeks, and finally got a what's called a cochlear implant. Now, a cochlear implant is a device that is put in your ear, and it's attached to the cochlea, which is, sometimes it's called the second ear, because it really is responsible for your being able to hear. And it was successful. What it does is it gives electronic signals, and it gets into the nerves, and that go to the part of the brain that registers for hearing, and it, in some people, restores their hearing, and in this case it did. So he got his hearing back, but he went several weeks or several months without it, not being able to hear anything. And I'm not sure whether the implant brings back all of the hearing, or if it just brings back, hopefully, a substantial amount of it. But at any rate, he did get his hearing back, and he's on the show again and doing his talk show like he used to do. But in a half an hour, he was deaf. Think of how frightening that must have been for him. And just suddenly, he couldn't hear. And he could hear that his hearing was getting less and less and less. And then suddenly, he could hear nothing, absolutely nothing at all. But it was restored. Now, I don't know what he took, and I don't know how much of it that he took, but it was revealed that it was what he took that caused him to lose his hearing, and to lose it rapidly. So a second example, a man took colloidal silver. Now, colloidal silver, it's like a clear liquid, and you can taste it. It has a lot of silver in it. And it's supposed to be able to fight cancer. And I know years ago there were people that were taking it and then buying it and drinking it and all of that because they thought it would fight off cancer. And I don't think there was much taste to it. Well, he turned blue. His skin turned absolutely blue. I don't know how much he took, but I suspect he took a fair amount. You know, it used to come in bottles, and you can just pour it out and drink it. So his skin, his hair, his nails, everything about him turned blue. The unfortunate part is he can't get his normal skin color back again. He will constantly, throughout his entire life, be blue. And they did a television show on him, and they called him the Blue Man, because his color is blue. I saw the show, and he never will get back to whatever his normal skin color was, all because he took too much. Now, there is a home shopping network. I've used them myself, and there's a man on there that talks about hair care, and he sells herbs. You don't shampoo your hair. You use these herbs in your hair. And it's supposed to make your hair look bright and beautiful and shiny. In fact, one of the television hosts on the program said she'd been using it for 6 years or so, and she never used shampoo. She's never used shampoo since she started these herbs. Now, what he does is he sells different kinds of herbs for different kinds of purposes. And there's one that you start off with, and then if you want to, you can mix or take another herb instead. And it's supposed to make your hair look wonderful. Now, I have to say, for those people that I saw, the hosts that use it, they really do look wonderful. Their hair looks terrific. They said they've never used shampoo in all these years. They've just used the herbs. Well, I heard maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago that this man is now being sued. But he's being sued because they use these herbs on a child. Now, children don't react to medications and herbs the same as adults do. Maybe she had an allergy, but she lost her hair. It came out in clumps and her hair was gone. So he's being sued for that, because that's definitely what they used on her, was the same thing that other people are using with success. This was his one failure. So I haven't seen it sold since, but I don't know, it may be sold. He may still be selling it, but I don't happen to see it, because I guess I don't happen to turn on the channel at the right time. Or they may have taken it off. They were selling hoverboards too, until the hoverboards started catching fire and burning houses down. And then I think for a while they stopped selling hoverboards. Now I think they're selling them again, maybe a different type of battery or something. But all of these people, all they have to do is just do the wrong thing at the right time, and then you get the consequences for that. Now, you have to be careful as to what you put in your body. You have to be careful of what works for you and what doesn't. And you always have to remember that if you're reading something, somebody wants to sell it. And if they want to sell it, they're going to praise its effectiveness. And maybe it is effective, but there are some people that can't take everything that's being offered on television. There are some people that will have adverse reactions, like that little girl did, and she lost her hair. I don't know whether her hair ever came back. I never heard anything more about the lawsuit after that. But I did hear an announcement about it, that he was being sued because of what happened to this little girl. Now, I'm going to show you something that does work, and to do this, I'm going to use my spoon. I got a book by Weilen and Weilen, W-I-L-E-N. There are 2 females, and they write books, and this particular book, they do write good stuff. I do like them. And they wrote this book on old-time remedies that work. And I just opened it randomly and got to a page where it says, what do you do for cramps? Foot cramps, toe cramps, and muscle cramps. And I thought that's pretty interesting, because a lot of elderly people have a lot of cramps. They do, partly because of the medications that they're taking. I know blood pressure medication can give a lot of cramps, and I know a lot of people that have problems like that. And what it said to do was, if you have a cramp, and I think it said teaspoon, but this isn't a teaspoon, but it is a spoon, put the spoon on your cramp and you will decramp immediately. So you would put this part of the spoon, the curved part, on wherever the cramp was. And wouldn't you know, it really does work. I've done it 2 or 3 times, because I have leg cramps too, and foot cramps and toe cramps because of the vascular problem I have. And when I cramp up now, I just carry a spoon with me, and within 2 or 3 seconds, you can feel the cramp lessen. And then you have to hold it for a while, and you have to put it on your bare skin. And when you hold it for a while, it gets less and less and less. And in less than a minute, that cramp is gone. I used to have cramps that last for, it seemed like 15, 20 minutes, and they were horrible. And I just keep my spoon with me and do that. So this is a non-invasive thing that really does work. I'm not telling you to use it. I can't give you any medical information, and I don't even know why it works, but it does work. So once in a while, you'll get into a pattern. You'll see something that actually is good. It actually does do what it's supposed to do. But I would never say anything if it was invasive or if you had to take something internally or something like that. But this is just putting a spoon on yourself. I don't know if maybe some other silverware would work just as well, but the book specified a spoon, and so that's what I use. Now, I did hear also about Medicare Part D. I mentioned in one class, I think maybe a couple of segments ago, that I thought that next year that the Medicare Part D, the donut hole, would be closed. Well, I've read something else on it, and what's going to happen is next year, what the donut hole will be different. You, instead of paying most of the the prescription cost, because you're in that donut hole, which is nothing but a way for drug companies to make more money, but instead of that, they're going to kind of shrink it so you pay only 1/4 of what your prescription cost, rather than the full amount, or almost the full amount. And so that might be helpful for people who are looking for less drug costs. But what I suspect is happening is that they're going to raise the price of medications. In fact, there is all kinds of information out there now, people talking about the fact that the prescription costs have gone sky high. Well, I'm wondering, and this is just my opinion, and I can be wrong as well as right, so I'm not saying this because I know for a fact, but I suspect that what's happening is that the drug companies are raising the price of medications, so by the time they get to the point where you're paying 1/4, that fourth will be quite a bit, because the drug will be so expensive that 1/4 will still be maybe unmanageable for some people. And I think basically it's all greed, and I hope that something puts a stop to it, because I'm sick and tired of people having to make a choice as to whether they eat or whether they buy medications. That should not be a problem in this country at all. So these are some other examples I just want to mention to you, and as I find out more information, I'll probably just relay it to you. Now, getting to the medications, at one point in our history, people used herbs all the time. It's what they had. It's what they knew. And they knew what would work. And so they became skilled at it. And then when you started to have medications, it was based on the herbs. And there are still medications today that are based on herbs. Only a lot of times these medications are created in a laboratory, and they have the exact same ingredient chemically as what you would get if you were taking herbs. But you have to be careful. But it needs to be well monitored, so that when you're getting a medication, you know exactly what's in it, how much is in it. If you're getting an herb, do you know how much you're getting? Or is it just something that you pick up off a shelf somewhere and buy it? So there are many synthetic drugs, but they're exactly like herbs that you may be picking up somewhere else, and some of them are still based. Some of the medications are still based on herbs. Opiates still come from the poppies, you know, so there is still a direct link to herbs. Some drugs still use animal sources. Now, all new drugs have to go through a very long period of testing before they are available and approved for use by the Food and Drug Administration. The Food and Drug Administration, the FDA, will decide when a drug or a prescription is safe for human consumption and when it can be sold to the public. So when the drug is approved, it can be marketed, and it's given a brand name by the manufacturer who's going to produce it. And the manufacturer has 17 years that they can use it, and it can't be touched by any other company. It's like their sole drug. And so they want to keep it as their sole drug. So sometimes they'll make little changes in it and get a patent for another 17 years. years or so, because they want to be the only one that's selling it, because it may be a popular drug, it may be very effective, and so therefore they want to keep it for themselves and their own profit as long as they can. But 17 years is the limit, and another manufacturer can come along and they can make the same drug. Now, they probably will give it a different brand name. It may have a different filler material, and so it'll be different, but at the same time, it will have the same active ingredient as the original drug did, and they can sell it maybe for a cheaper price. So gradually it gets so that many people, many companies may be producing it. So 17 years is the limit on that. Now, the testing of a drug usually takes anywhere from 6 to 10 years to test it so that people will know. They test it on animals, which I don't think is exactly fair, because animals don't necessarily react the same as people to certain drugs, and they also use human volunteers, but it has to be tested. I know that I have participated in a test for a new diabetic medication, and I took it for several months, and I had to take it just in a very rigid way, and then they gave me a test strip meter. You know, diabetics use these meters to check what their blood sugar is. And this was kind of a thing. It was like this big. It was kind of large. It had umpteen buttons on it, and you could do all kinds of things with it. They wouldn't sell it to the public, but we got them for free if we were on this kind of experiment. And that this experiment lasted for months and probably for years, because I imagine they worked on it for a long time before they used human volunteers. I was one of those human volunteers. The advantage to going into a test situation is that you are monitored carefully, and the care that you receive is all free. And then if there's any problem and they can tap into it, then of course you would immediately be taken off the drug. Now, I don't know whatever happened to this drug, whether it ever went to market or whether it didn't go to market. I don't know. But at the same time, it was tested. So 6 to 10 years of is the average, and the drug has to be safe and it has to be effective before they let it go out. And they do very complicated double-blind studies. Now, a double-blind study is when healthy people take it and people who are sick take it, and they compare the results. And sometimes they find out the drug works better for conditions that they didn't know it would even work for, better than it was than with the condition that they were actually testing it for. So all kinds of results comes from this kind of studies. And the studies always have to be by FDA-approved procedures, so that they are following strict guidelines in terms of what their research is and how they test the drug, to keep the public safe, to keep people safe, and to keep animals safe. The drug's benefits have to be compared with its risks. What are the risks of taking a drug? What would the allergic reactions be if people get allergies with it? And what are the benefits? And you have to weigh the two together. Is it safe to put a drug out to market if it has side effects that are so awful that people don't want to take it? I am aware now of a blood pressure medication that causes, if you get too much of it, it causes you to go deaf. And I didn't realize it until I started reading some of the information that came along with the medication. And sometimes the people who go deaf will get their hearing back when they stop the medication, but not all people who go deaf will get it back. So therefore, is it worth the risk, if it's going to affect a person's hearing, whether they should take it or not? Or is there a level that they can take it without worrying about what their hearing's going to be, and they don't go beyond that level, whatever it is? So there are a lot of questions that you have to ask, and I would suggest that I'm not telling anyone what to do, but if you get a new medication and you don't feel good on it, then you have to check what the side effects are, because it'll be listed, and check if you want to report the side effects, or if it's too much and your body can't tolerate it, or if you have an allergy to it, then you have to switch the medication and take something else. It's just something you have to be aware of. If you're putting something in your system, you need to know what it is and what it does and why it's there, and do you really need it. Now, I don't think any reputable doctor is going to be prescribing things that you don't need, but neither do they know, and they can't know, how it's going to affect you once you start taking it. And so it's always a case of playing catch up, and can I take it? This is a side effect. I can't take it. I break out in a rash, or whatever it is. You need to be in close contact with your doctor if you're taking something that's been prescribed. But if you're taking something that's been prescribed and you're taking an herb too, you may be double dosing on a medication and not even realizing that you're doing it. So you have to be really careful of that. Most drugs have 3 names. They have the medical name, and that is adopted by a council. There is a council, and it has pharmacists and doctors on that council that determine what the name of a drug is going to be. And so it'll have a medical connotation. Then they also have a brand name that's chosen by a manufacturer. The people who are going to manufacture the drug will choose a brand name. And the brand name is going to be something that's going to be easy to remember, so people will be familiar with it, so they'll know what to ask for. It's just mainly for convenience and for people being able to remember it. And then it also has a chemical name. So you have the medical name, a brand name, and the chemical name. The chemical name describes the drug chemically. It will be a very, very long name, and it describes what happens chemically with the drug. So these 3, and these drugs that are available go according to a schedule. They schedule each drug according to how easy it is to become addicted to it. And so we don't have much time left, so I don't want to get in the middle of this, so I think I'll close it here, and we're going to continue with this next time, and I'll tell you what the schedules of the drugs are. And if you look at the prescriptions, even though they won't say Schedule 1, Schedule 3, it'll say how many times you can get it refilled within a certain amount of time, and that tells you what the schedule is for that particular drug. Not all drugs that are scheduled can be bought by people if they feel it's too addictive or it's too dangerous. It won't be used, but because it is a drug, it can be classed as one, it still has to have a schedule assigned to it. So I'm going to close it here. We're going to continue with this next time, so please join me then.